people have this vision of just like personalized everything where it's like coffee that will give you exactly the cup of coffee that you want. And it's like, I don't know exactly the cup of coffee that I want. I don't think anything does. I would have to like acquire that taste and decide what the best cup
Hmm.
of coffee was. And probably that's different from day to day, even.
Yeah.
That's not a target that is achievable.
Right. That is very much a moving target, especially like,
Yep.
yeah, because it's like some days it's like, well, some days I am going to want like just green tea, and some days I am going to want espresso, and some days I'm going to want black coffee, and it's all depending on my mood that day.
Yeah, and you could be like, well, probably it's based on the weather or some like all of these things that like AI could look up and it could somehow predict this magically. And it's like, no, I think some of it is just like the whims of my
Whimsy.
brain. Hello and welcome to the Fast and Broken podcast, where we take a critical look at the fast-moving world of tech and online culture. I'm Carly Rector, a software engineer and startup founder who does not believe recommendation algorithms have a real goal that they can achieve.
And I'm Teresa Kramer. I'm a MBA student, a professional voice actor, and a project manager who really wishes there was like some magical recommendation algorithm out there for me just to tell me, it's like, tell me what book to read next. It's like, that's the big one for me. I'm always like, oh gosh, I don't know what book I should read next. And it's so hard to find new ones sometimes.
Yeah, and in that case, it's maybe there's a right answer, but maybe you just need something to tell you, and then you do that.
Yeah.
So that like takes away the indecision part of it. And it's not
Yeah.
necessarily about there being the right book to read next. There's
Right.
just this decision
So
fatigue
someone
part
needs
of
to
it.
make a decision for me, take the decisions out of my hands.
Yeah. But yeah, anyway, so topics for this week. We'll be talking about the intersection of art and technology. I went to an event last week that was interesting on that topic. We're going to talk about the TikTok deal, since that's been in the news lately and relevant to what's working out there. And then we're going to talk a little bit about AI training data and copyright again, and regurgitating things that are in your training data set, and in particular, this recent Washington Post article on Sora. This event that I went to last week was hosted by Christie's, the art gallery, which also has a venture fund and does a lot of stuff in the tech space also. So they had a bunch of people there sort of talking about trends in art and technology and the AI future, including like, art museum directors, VCs, one artist, and some people from Meta and Microsoft. It was pretty interesting, but also reminded me of many opinions that I have on this that I wanted to rant about on this podcast.
Sounds good.
So as you know, but maybe all of our listeners do not, I ran an art startup that was a digital art marketplace and trading card game. One of the things that definitely hit me at this event is like, I have never for my entire life believed you can only be creative or you can be technical and not both. There was a lot of like people being like, well, I'm not an artist and I don't know anything about art, or like I am not good with technology. And it's like, that's a state that you could change. You can learn those skills
Right.
on both sides.
Yeah. Yeah,
um,
I was gonna say, surprised they're both skills. And this, I was in high school. I was somebody who took calculus BC AP exams, and I was in the school play every single year. So it's
mhm.
like, categorically, I feel like it is very false that you cannot be both creatively minded and, like mathematically, scientifically minded. Is just one of those skills people seem to think is easier to train, and the other one people seem to think is
Mhm.
this nebulous, impossible thing that unless you have talent for it, you just, better give up. You can never, do anything with it. So,
Yeah. I mean, both of them go that way in some cases, but yeah, particular is one of the things that people don't believe is a skill that you can learn. Yes, I took computer science and drawing and painting in high school, sort of like ways of thinking that you can train yourselves in. But obviously, there's some people who are just like, well, I could never be good at math. Also, that's really gendered in a way that I
uh,
have always hated in particular, but
yeah,
um,
the gendering of like arts and sciences is always, yeah, that's always something that really gets on my nerves a lot. But yeah, just in general, the divisions of like arts and sciences, like, guess what? They're both skills, and it's like, true, you can be naturally talented, you can have like an adeptness and an ease with one versus the other, or both.
yes, and like yes, because you can have a natural like talent advantage and things like that. But I feel like
Yeah.
the edge that gives you is pretty limited. Like if you took someone
Yeah,
who's naturally talented at art but not trained in art at all, and then took someone who is not naturally talented and gave them some training, how much training do you think that needs before they surpass the natural talent with no training person?
right.
Not a lot, probably, and maybe that matters at like edges where there's a limit on how great you can be if you're not naturally talented, but it's just like I don't also don't think that's a single
No.
spectrum
No,
either.
yeah,
So,
yeah. Well, and it's also one of those things like, yeah, well, like if you've got a natural talent for it and you don't train that talent, then, you're going to like hit that
hmm
skill plateau that a lot of like people talk about in education, where it's like you get to a certain level of good at the thing, and then subsequent increases in your skill at the thing become more difficult to attain. I think it is just that like growth versus fixed mindset kind of thing, where it's like if you think you can develop a skill, if you think you can like train yourself to be good at a thing, then you can.
hmm
If you think you
yeah,
can't be good at math, congratulations, you're not going to be good at math. If you think you can do math, it doesn't matter what your brain is, you can teach yourself how to math. You might not learn it in the same way as everybody else, which is a problem with our education system maybe, but yeah.
yeah. And just a big frustration for me here being in the tech world is I think it's definitely a growth mindset thing, but even the people who you would think were like extremely growth mindset people, like
Hmm.
startup people or
Yeah.
like tech people more generally, just like put art in this whole separate category of no, I could not possibly even begin to understand that.
That's so
And
weird.
will
Works.
sometimes try to frame that in like a complimentary way of just like artists are amazing, I could never do that, but it's never really come off that way to me, that because it's like if you really cared you would try to learn it
Yeah.
because it's
Yeah.
not impossible to do. So
Right. And that feels like, yeah, like such a backhanded compliment of like, oh, what you do is so amazing. Like, I could never learn how to do it. And therefore, I'm going to like devalue it and try to like, shortcut my way into it. And it's just like, maybe you should try to learn how to do the thing actually, so that understand the effort that goes into it and understand like the principles of it.
yeah, so yeah, that's a big one that frustrates me always, that came up a bunch,
Hmm.
and I thought was a little bit annoying, especially in a panel that was supposed to be out about the intersection of art and technology. It was just like a principal at Meta who works on their VR glasses. Like, well, he has thoughts on how that can help you like experience things. Knows nothing about art. Was not in that world at all. But that
Right.
does segue to the other interesting thing about this panel, which is that they did talk a lot about VR, and just like the
Mm.
difference between traditional, you're looking at a painting on a wall in a gallery, which obviously Christie's has been historically very focused on, and what is the new way to experience art. And maybe these VR glasses can do it, and talking about how it can replicate like what the human eye can see perfectly exactly, and a bunch of stuff like that, and like things that you could do with AR, which I do
Hmm.
think is actually interesting, where
Yeah.
you can have a physical gallery and can you go in and you can augment it in ways of adding
Hmm.
things digitally if you're like wearing glasses or something like that as you look
Yeah.
around. But
Yeah. I feel like that'd be interesting. There's a lot of stuff in like art history that has to do with like the scans of pieces where they've like, oh, we saw the underdrawing of this picture.
mhm,
I'm thinking of Sargent's Madam X, I think is one of those, where like the piece has been repainted. So it does not
yeah,
look like it did originally. And so yeah, like I can see like, yeah, like an application with some sort of augmented reality where it's like, okay, here's the piece as it appears like in the exhibit, and here's the piece as it was painted, and being able to kind of like
mhm,
digitally cycle between the two of those. So I can see a very interesting application for that, but that's something that needs to have like that understanding of like here's like the depth and history and like
mhm,
process that went into creating these pieces, and being able to use
yeah.
augmented reality to kind of expand on something like that.
Yeah, I definitely think there's opportunities there. And even
Hmm.
just like not talking about a physical painting, or maybe there's some
Hmm.
physical object that exists in this room, but there's also like a more immersive experience that you could
Yeah.
have with things that like are represented only digitally, and how that can change and change how you're perceiving what you're seeing. I think there's a lot of cool stuff that you could do there. The thing that was really interesting for me is that that was basically that, and AI, VR and AI were the sort of the two technologies that they talked about overall. And that leaves out the internet entirely and
Hmm.
any digital art or digital content creator type thing. And That's something that I went into talking to people about Cosign, which is my art startup, a lot, which is that if you're in the traditional art space, you're thinking paintings, and then you're like, paintings plus VR? That's somehow a completely separate world from digitally native art, like
Hmm.
digital painting or 3D modeling or animation or any of that kind of stuff, that video games, immersive,
Yeah.
like interactive experiences that I think are doing a lot of cool stuff with technology.
Hmm.
And that was not a topic for this
Hmm.
at all.
I feel like it's basically outlining the divide between like fine arts and pop art in a way of like, it's like when you think of like fine arts, yeah, you're going to be thinking of like paintings and sculptures and more traditional art forms, but the more digital art forms, so like, yeah, like animation, video games tends to be thought of as less fine art and more pop art, even though it's like the skill that some like people have in creating these. That line is so
Yeah, like
weird
that's
because
there's a medium difference there, but like, why
yes,
is the difference between fine and popular art, like if it's a physical painting or a digital one? Like that
right.
doesn't like, I think you could have both of those in both categories.
Yeah, it's so true. Yeah, I don't know enough about the art world to kind of like really comment on this, but I do think it's a thing that's a divide. It is interesting how it's like video games are very much an art form. Anybody who argues that a video game is not an art form hasn't really played video games and doesn't
Hmm.
really understand the level of like craft that goes into making them and the experience of playing them and things like that.
The thing about video games is like, is every video game a piece of fine art?
No.
No, but like, not is it every painting is not a piece of fine art either. And
Yeah.
like, there are some unique things that you can do with video games in terms of
Mhm.
like how you communicate emotions by making the player an active participant in it, that I
Right.
think are really interesting and cool. That you can do stuff, and people have done a lot of cool stuff with. So,
Yeah, yeah, like the study of ludonarrative is like just an entire thing of like the engagement of like the player and the telling of a story by the engagement of the player in the act of play is like just fascinating. But then like this thought process of like, oh, augmented reality with traditional medium, I'm reminded of like there was an exhibit that I went to when I was in New York a couple of years back, which was like Kandinsky. It was held in like this old like an old train station or something. They had projected like different pieces of his on the walls everywhere and had like digitally altered them so that they kind of would like flow from one to the other, and there was like a soundtrack going, and this is a thing that's
mhm.
popular these days. It's like they do this with a lot, like they do this with Van Gogh, I want to say, and like Picasso.
Yeah, I went to the Van Gogh exhibit when it was
Yeah.
here.
Yeah, that like these immersive experiences. And so it's like saying it's like, oh, we need augmented reality or like VR to do that. It's like you really actually don't, because it's like we're
Hmm.
already doing this with the tools and technology that's currently available to us. So what is that additional layer that you're bringing to the party by having it be VR? Because at that point in time, all you're really doing is changing the depth of field on the screen pretty
Hmm.
much. If
Yeah.
you can get this kind of experiential thing without that piece, what does that piece bring to the party?
Yeah, I think that is just like an interesting perceptual split about like people who are very excited about VR don't seem to like understand why that should be better than 2D version of it.
I would argue like the VR doesn't enhance it in such a way that it really like justifies the expense of the technology. It's like your net benefit there is not really overriding your net additional cost there. So it's like what's
Yeah.
the point?
Yeah, that's the big difficulty that VR is having, is like it's a
Mhm.
pretty expensive piece of hardware with some pretty
Mhm.
limited use cases, and everyone's still
Yeah,
trying to find like what is the everyday use case for VR that is going to get people
right.
to actually have these things. And no one has really found that yet. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then one other thing I have on the note from this event is just like, I asked a question about how artists are going to get paid in the AI future when everything is automated. And no one knows the answer to that question. So I don't know that we need to go in depth on that one, but
I feel
I
I
wanted to
feel
note
like
that,
I feel like we've talked already on this podcast about like
yes,
how are
don't
you
need to
going
go
to
in
pay
that.
people? Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, noting that these people
Mhm.
high up in the fine art world also had no real answer to that question. Um, so
Yeah.
that's cool. We can segue from there to our next topic,
Sounds good.
um, which is
TikTok.
talking some about TikTok.
Mhm.
Um, which I'm surprised that we haven't talked about at all because I have a lot of thoughts
It's
on it
true.
so far.
I
News as of this past week, there was a deadline on the 18th, September
hmm
18th, that has passed again. Trump says that for real, there's a deal coming together for real, but he's also just postponed the deadline again. I think
hmm
indefinitely this time, just like until it comes together. Um, which is like the third extension. The things that I saw noting on this that I thought was pretty pointed was one of the reasons that this bill was passed that was to ban or divest TikTok is that it was supposed to be a national security emergency, that
hmm
this was influencing the US people with whatever Chinese propaganda or a security
Yeah.
issue or whatever the actual argument they had around that was. And apparently it was not enough of an emergency to just not leave it in place unchanged for almost a full year at this point.
So is it really an emergency?
But yeah, it became not
hmm
an emergency when Trump decided he liked TikTok actually after he got elected. So,
Of course.
um, is basically what it seems to have been
hmm
that happened. And I posted on LinkedIn about this. It really frustrates me how many people don't seem to care about the whole TikTok thing because they're boomers or whatever, and they're just like, well,
hmm
TikTok is that dance app that all the kids are on, and it doesn't really matter. Whatever is going around on TikTok, that's probably bad, good, and we should just get rid of that. And they don't care.
hmm
It's like a not what most of TikTok is.
Right.
B, perhaps we should care about the government being able to just ban an entire social platform in which a lot of people are having speech on,
Yeah.
for not very well defined reasons. Like the
Yeah.
Supreme Court case that said that this was allowed was extremely concerning because they basically had no argument for why this should be an exception to
Yeah.
the First Amendment. There was like, hypothetically, it's a national security danger, but they had no actual provided evidence on why that is the case.
Right.
Um, and then the deal that they have now, it is unclear how that deal will solve any of the concerns that were supposed to be the reasons for this. The details of the deal are unclear, but basically the idea is a bunch of US investors will buy US TikTok from
hmm
ByteDance. ByteDance will be like a 22% owner or something like that, and the rest of the owners will be Oracle, Larry Ellison in particular, um, Andreessen Horowitz, and a bunch of other people who Trump's friends with. And
hmm
supposedly the U.S. government will get a several $1 billion just like deal makers fee or something like that, which is not a thing that you usually do ever,
No.
but
Yeah.
Trump could just extort people, so he's gonna try and do that
Oh,
apparently.
gross. Hate that.
And then logistically, what will actually happen apparently is there will be U.S. TikTok. It will be separate from global TikTok.
hmm
Um, Presumably, people will not be able to like interact with each other across the different versions of TikTok. Unclear if that will mean everyone in the US has to download a new app. They're trying to
hmm
make it so that's not the case, but in that case, it's just like, so that people can just use their existing app forever. How exactly would that work?
Yeah.
And then, of course, the other big concern was their recommendations algorithm for their For You page. That's basically TikTok's secret sauce, is that
Yeah.
they have a really good For You page algorithm. But also that's the part of the security concern that it's pushing Chinese propaganda secretly or whatever,
hmm
or is biased in some way that they don't like. So would this hypothetical US version of TikTok have that or not? And
hmm
the answer they have given to that this past week is they will copy and lease the algorithm to the US version and then retrain it, which I
Hmm.
don't know what that means actually. As a person who works in recommendation algorithms, that is not clear to me what that means exactly.
I will say, like, this is one of those situations where I also am like very leery of TikTok, but not for the like national security reasons. I'm leery of TikTok because of how much access it has to your personal data. And my constant thing whenever like people talk about TikTok is I always think of the West Elm Caleb story, which I don't know if you're familiar with this story or not,
I don't think
but
so.
okay. So like West Elm Caleb was this guy in New York City who was like dating girls and then like ghosting them after a period of time. Like kind of being scummy in that regard, but not
Hmm.
actually being a terrible human being. And so like one of his dates posted on TikTok about this guy and says like, "Oh, I can't stand this guy that like just ghosted me, blah blah blah." And because his contact information was in her phone and his contact information was also in the phone of all the other girls that he had dated, they started showing up on each other's For You pages on TikTok. And so this is how everybody this guy had ghosted, like, was able to locate each other on TikTok and just like, oh my God, wait, is this West that like is this Caleb? Does he work at West Elm? It's like, yeah, this is the same guy. So it's like this, cadre of women all found each other via their TikTok For You pages and were able to create this movement against this one guy who, again, like, was being kind of emotionally unavailable, but wasn't doing anything super, like, terrible. He was just kind of being a loser. And it's like, and that story, like, that weird panopticon of For You page, that's the thing that concerns me. That's the thing that
Yeah,
I,
that's
like, kind of
concerning, but
worry
also
about.
Facebook has been doing that for like a decade.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. Like, and I think it's like some, like, to your point, like, it's something about TikTok's special sauce. I think that, like, kind of made that, like, go viral in a way. Um,
Yeah, I
yeah,
think that's true, but I think that's true for literally every social media
it
platform. Because
is.
like,
It is.
part of the national security concern is just like it has access to all of these people's data, and now China has it and stuff like that.
Mhm.
It's like, okay, but
Yeah.
many platforms have access to all of our data, and that is also should be very concerning to the U.S. government,
Right.
especially because they just sell it to data brokers who can sell it to China. Like, there's no reason that
Yeah.
couldn't also get to China. Like,
Yeah.
in fact, that's probably a more likely way for it to get there than
Right.
company just using it directly, because then they have more plausible deniability.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. No, it's like,
and
yeah, it is very much like the real problem here is data brokers. The real problem here is data brokers and continues to be data brokers. I'm not on Facebook either. I don't use X. I really try to avoid most social media because of these reasons, because it's like it's a free product. And so I am the product that is being sold to people. Like, hey, maybe you actually should put legislation in place against data brokers. I would be aligned with that, and that would solve your national security problems great. And that would not invite as many chilling effects in terms of, like, can the government shut down just one social media platform because they feel like it? It would be more like,
yep,
oh no, can the government take action to protect the private data of its citizens? Which I think most people would be in agreement with. Um, but yeah, I don't disagree that TikTok is kind of, I don't like kind of a scummy platform, but like it's a scummy platform in a way that every other platform is a scummy platform. And what you're going after is not like, you're not
yeah, and like
attacking the
again,
solution. Yeah.
unclear how what their solution here is going to change any of it. Like,
Right. Yeah. It's like they're still going to be selling data. It's like, okay, like, yeah, they're going to take the same algorithm and just be like, okay, we'll just only use US data in the
yeah,
algorithm. It's like,
so
well, great. They're still going to be using, like, your contact information, like your location, your, like,
yeah,
personally identifiable information. All of that's not going to, like, leave the system. It's just not going to China anymore.
yeah, which it's already not, because they're already storing U.S. data on Oracle servers. I think so, um, like physically. But yeah, to retraining the algorithm. So like, this is the thing for me there as a person who's worked on recommendation algorithms. If
Hmm.
you're imagining that the problem with this algorithm is it has some bias in it, like Chinese national bias,
Yeah.
there are a few different ways that you could do that depending on how this algorithm works. It could be just like in code that you explicitly say in some sort of configuration to like weight something deliberately,
Hmm.
just like put your thumb on the scale. Or you could have trained it to push that sort of content like implicitly by optimizing for some particular thing that does that, but that's harder.
Hmm.
Um, and the thing is, if it's the first one and they're copying the algorithm over, they will be able to see that because they could just like go look at the code and see what it's doing. And then if they're
Hmm.
not changing that, then retraining it doesn't change anything. And if they're not,
Yeah.
and if it's the second thing where they are optimizing for something, some particular kind of output, retraining it is still not going to change that. If you haven't changed the optimization function, you're just like retraining it on a different set of data. It is not at all clear to me what that means or how that's going to solve their supposed problems.
Yeah. No, yeah.
um,
It is very much like, it's like, congratulations, you're really not you're creating more problems as opposed to, like, solving the problems. You're really
yeah,
just, like,
well,
creating kind of more unfortunate precedents for us.
and giving control of a giant global platform and economic powerhouse to all of Trump's friends. I
Yeah.
was also reading some articles about how if, in fact, Oracle/Larry Ellison gets this big chunk of TikTok, as said, and also some other stuff goes through if he wants to buy Warner Brothers Discovery, I think, or his
Oh
son does,
god.
or something like that, he would be probably the biggest owner of media since since a long time.
Yeah, that's scary. I
Um,
don't like that.
yeah.
Well,
And
because
then
that
yeah,
is that like was it the Paramount Warner Brothers deal?
the Ellison family is backing a bid by Paramount,
Oh, okay, so they're backing the Paramount Skydance
which
bid.
recently came under Skydance Media, led by his son David Ellison.
Ah, that's what it is. Yeah, so it is that. Oh boy.
While
Yeah, like
Larry
I was
Ellison is
actually.
provide yeah,
Mhm,
while Larry Ellison is providing the financial backing, the bid is being executed by Paramount Global.
I see.
So,
Mm-hmm. Don't like that. Yeah, like I was actually kind of like, hey, good on you when it was like, oh, hey, Warner Brothers Discovery was splitting off because it's like it seemed for a while that like all of our media companies were just merging into just these weird, like singularities. And it's just like, oh, yay, you guys actually split off. Huzzah. And it's like, nope, nope, nope. It's worse. It's gotten worse. So, ugh, don't like
yep,
that.
yeah. So that's
Anyways.
cool.
Hmm.
And gives like Musk Twitter and Larry Ellison TikTok,
TikTok.
or a good
Yeah.
chunk TikTok. And yeah. Anyway, so that's cool. And it definitely seems to be a lot more about that than anything about what they thought the actual emergency of
Hmm.
TikTok was. The
Yeah.
other part of it that there's been reporting on lately is that um, Congress was presented a report showing that pro-Palestinian content outnumbered pro-Israeli content on TikTok. And that was shortly before they passed the ban.
Oh
Perhaps
boy.
related? Question mark.
Question mark? Yeah, that seems like it is, especially because it's like seems like banning pro-Palestinian content is something that all the social media platforms really like to do. And so yeah, if TikTok's not doing that, then there's like, oh, how dare you, how dare you call out an actual genocide that's occurring in this day and age when the party line of our national government seems to be just blithely failing to acknowledge the fact that it's a genocide.
Yep.
But
So
yeah.
yes,
Hmm.
that's a problem for them, and they can just ban the platform and point at China. So
Yeah.
problem
Ugh.
solved.
No.
Problem of free speech.
Don't like it.
Yeah. So
Anyways.
that's that one. We'll more updates to come, I guess. They still haven't
Hmm.
finalized the deal. The deal is apparently in more or less the same place that it was in like March when they first announced it. But they're still sorting through the exact like ownership balance of it, and also whether the government gets paid billions of dollars out of it, which like
Probably shouldn't.
which they shouldn't. No, it like that's not a normal thing to happen, and no one is pretending it is. They're just like, well, Trump says that he gets a finder's fee or whatever, like because he could just extort people now, like because that's what the
Yeah.
president does.
Yeah. No, don't like it.
All right, so this is a Washington Post article from this past week titled OpenAI won't say whose content trained its videos tool. We found some clues. What this is about is they got Sora, which is OpenAI's video generator, to generate a bunch of content of copyrighted characters or settings or logos or etc., which obviously implies pretty strongly that it has been trained on that. And I thought this was in particular interesting because they talk in some detail about some things they had to do to get around the generation side guardrails that we were talking about a couple weeks ago.
Mm, yeah.
So they talked about some things they did. They have some movies. They have just like the animated Universal logo, the animated 20th Century Fox logo, some Netflix shows, TikTok style videos with the TikTok logo on them,
Mm,
just like Minecraft footage straight up and things like that. But they talk about some things like, for example, you could not just ask it to make SpongeBob. It didn't like that. But if you asked for Robert the Sponge. It gave you something that looked very similar to
it
SpongeBob.
gave you a very SpongeBob looking sponge. Yeah.
Yes. And interestingly, what one prompt that they had was an animated sponge wearing pants at the bottom of the ocean. And one time it gave them a warning that that could be branded content that and therefore like they were
Hmm.
rewriting the text and you might not get the result you wanted or whatever. Like there's apparently a warning that you can get that. But another
Uh-huh.
time with the same prompt it did not. So that is not deterministic. So they clearly have some AI system deciding whether you're trying to prompt for copyrighted content basically by seeing if
Uh,
there's a brand name in there or things like that.
yeah.
So it will catch it if you have brand names in it and stop you and not generate that. But if you do it indirectly,
It's still going to give you copyrighted content because it's been trained on copyrighted content.
yeah, another interesting example is that they got a clip of Wednesday, the Netflix show, which they couldn't
Mhm.
prompt directly, but they prompted with trailer of a TV show on Wednesday, as in the day, which apparently the AI that determines whether that's a copyrighted term didn't interpreted that as the day, but the AI that is doing the actual video generation interpreted it as the Wednesday, the television show, because it replicated exactly the look of that show and also the logo. So
Mhm.
there's a lot of interesting stuff there where it's like
Yeah.
interesting, they trained on Netflix and Universal Pictures things and a whole bunch of copyrighted content, TikTok videos. Um,
Mhm.
which how did they get access to those? Netflix in particular theoretically is
Yeah.
paywalled, um, but there's a lot of videos that exist on the internet. There are clips of things that exist on YouTube. They have
Mhm.
almost certainly trained on YouTube.
Oh yeah.
TikTok videos are re-uploaded as YouTube shorts, tons of stuff like
Mhm.
that.
Yeah. Well, and like and like a lot of Netflix shows have like their clips on like the Netflix YouTube channel, or they'll have their own like channel for the show or what have you. But yeah, it's very obvious that they have been trained on copyrighted material, and it's just like, where do we draw the copyright lines? Especially if it's like,
Yeah,
yeah, it's like you clearly trained on SpongeBob episodes, so your algorithm or whatever is going to spit out SpongeBob even if you're not like, because like some of these, like a show set on Wednesday, nothing about that invites the show Wednesday. At that point in time, it's like, congratulations, you're going to spit out copyrighted material essentially when
hmm
somebody is not necessarily looking for,
yeah. I was gonna
that.
say that's
Mhm.
that's the big thing to our conversation a couple weeks ago, which is yeah, in this case you were trying to generate this, but some of these prompts a person could do inadvertently, or something similar for less immediately recognizable content, and
Right.
it clearly spits out extremely copyrighted looking content here in these cases. So there is no reason to believe that it's not doing that for
Hmm.
more innocuous prompts that people are doing unintentionally. So
Yeah. Yeah. No, we've talked about this before, but it's just like the whole, like, if you're going to train on copyrighted material, there needs to be something to make sure that like rights are respected, and like people have essentially like either they're getting paid for it, which ruins the AI like business model, which honestly in my opinion good. Like, you know oh, I'm sorry, you have like you were trying to, like generate income without the costs, and then the economic model caught up with you. It's
yeah,
so dumb that they're like, well, we thought we would get this stuff for free, and so we built our entire business model off of the assumption that this would all be free. And it's just like,
yeah,
why did
Mar-
you make that base assumption? That's a
yeah.
very stupid base assumption to make.
Mark Andreessen has a quote about this that is really like that is basically that is very frustrating. That it was talking
Yeah.
about the copyright issue and just being like, well, this whole model doesn't work if we have to pay for it. And it's like, okay, then you're not entitled
Yeah.
to a business model that works if you're not paying people for the work that they're generating.
Right. And
Like,
also, I would argue then the business model don't friggin' work.
yes,
It's like, that's basic economics, my dude. I don't feel like any contemporary AI company is a successful business, period. Like, I don't think any of them actually have a working business model that accounts for the cost of the raw materials of content that they use to train their models. All of them are like basically just, yeah, like we've talked about, like they're kind of kicking the can down the road until they can figure out a way to do this without having to pay for stuff. It's very frustrating that like all of these companies are just like built on toothpicks, and it's like castles of sand pretty much, and it's like, and everybody's just pretending that they are these grandiose amazing things, and it's just like they're not. They're all flawed. None of them are sound business decisions, but everybody seems to be deluded into thinking that they are.
yeah. Or I mean, not even that they are, but like again, like they're entitled to be because the AI
Right.
people, especially like AGI pilled people, are like, well, we got to build AI.
No.
And therefore anything that we need to do in order to build it is justified. And it's like, okay, you need
No.
to take a second there. And also, like, even if you even if you're assuming we gotta build AI is true, which I do not,
Yeah.
um, then you still can say like, so we got to figure out how to make this work in a way that compensates people appropriately, not so we have
Right.
to steal everything. Like there are ways that you could make it work. Like if we really think we need to develop AI as like the United States, we can subsidize it. Like there there are
Sure.
mechanisms for this that are not just
Right.
steal everything from everyone.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. No, yeah, it's very much, well, we've got to build AI. And it's like, do we? We're talking about earlier today, even just like VR is this thing that everybody's like, well, we can't really figure out what it's good for. And it's like AI to me just constantly feels like it's like we have made a solution. It's just like, okay, what was the problem? Well, we've made a solution.
they're both highly correlated more than you would hope they are with people who grew up reading science fiction,
Yeah.
and therefore think that's what the future is, and they're going to be the ones to build it. So
Mhm.
is
Yeah,
is
no.
VR worlds and AI.
It- yeah, yeah, it is very much like egotism in a lot of ways. It's like, well, I'm just going to make a shiny thing that's a problem solver, and it's just like, well, what's the problem it's solving? And it's like, but it's a problem solver, and it's like, you need the problem first. It's like that's really how you build a solid business. It's going to endure the test of time. Is you need to
That
actually
yeah
have a problem that you're solving.
reminds me of a deeply frustrating quote from Sam Altman, which is like, again, we're both from Amazon, which is all working backwards from the customer, find a customer
Yeah,
problem
yeah.
and then solve it. Sam Altman said explicitly that AI doesn't do that. He was like, no, you build your foundation model and then you find the places to apply it. Like that, he literally said that. So,
That's just so backwards. It's and like I know this is because we are both Amazonian, but I do feel like that's the one really good thing that came out of Amazon is
hmm
this idea that you start from the customer and then you figure out what is the customer's problem, what does the customer want, and you build that because it's like that's how you identify a need in the market. That's how you identify a sustainable business model is by knowing what people want, what is their demand for. And it's like, yeah,
yeah,
it's like you're basically like creating a supply in a world where there is no demand. It's such a house of cards. It's so much nothing, and it frustrates me every day, but
so yeah, this is an interesting article. Like more specifically than all of that sort of high level stuff, it deeply frustrates me how much OpenAI can get away with just being like, yeah, we're not going to tell you what we train stuff on. And people can still have some questions about whether it's trained on copyrighted content or not. And like, there's clearly no question based on looking at these clips that it is. I don't think
yeah,
there was any question beforehand either
no,
for people who are sensitive to this stuff and track it. But for just general people, I don't think that most people even know that that's a concern. Many of them would assume that, of course, they don't train on just like random copyrighted content because that would be ridiculous. And
surprise, it's ridiculous.
and like they can get away with that because they just don't talk about it, and that's deeply frustrating. And hopefully, more articles like this one will help it become more apparent that this is absolutely
uh,
what is happening without question.
yeah,
But
fingers crossed.
yeah, good. And it would be nice if we had some AI regulation that said people have had to
God,
disclose what data was in their training data set, which I think
please.
California has been trying to more, but
That's good.
um
Yeah.
yeah. But yeah, that's all I had on this one. It was just
Yep.
a timely example of the thing that we were just talking about, training on copyright data and then not very successfully trying to prevent it from
Yeah.
being generated. Thank you for listening to the Fast and Broken podcasts. I'm Carly Rector, and if you'd like to support my work, you can subscribe to my newsletter at carlyrector.substack.com.
And I'm Teresa Kramer, and if you'd like my voice on your product, you can visit my website at teresakramer.com.
And if you like the podcast, you can leave us a review. It helps us know people are listening and it helps more people find the podcast. See you next week.